I'm going to show you some ideas for packaging for your presents. I don't like to just use wrapping up paper, I like to do something a little bit different. So this is one idea that I do all the time. Here's an example of some packaging that I use to wrap up some soaps. For this one I used wallpaper and then stamped letters that said savon, which hopefully means soap in French. And then for these ones I used pages from a kind of damaged vintage book all about plants, had beautiful illustrations of plants. So for my one today, I've decided to use some of this fantastic quality wallpaper. I bought a whole roll of it. It was reduced. It only cost me about £5 and I can do loads and loads of presents. And then what I've done is, using some ink stamps, I've stamped a word on there. In this situation, because it's still going to be for some soap, I've put the word drift, and I felt that the curly whirly swirls on the wallpaper almost look like waves. Now you see how on this one we trapped some bias binding, black bias binding in the edge. I think on my wallpaper one I fancy a bit of colour, so I might first of all stitch some braiding on, find a way to trap some vintage lace in as well. Now before I do any of that I need to find out where the centre of my packaging is. So I've marked it there with a pencil because I'm going to put one of these labels, these woven labels, onto the back. So I'm going to find the centre of the back, because it wouldn't look very good if I put it ski-whiffy, although you could have it going up at the side, yeah. Trim it right to the edge. I'm not going to fold back the edge of my labels. And then I'm just going to put a bit of glue on the back, just any old kiddie glue, onto the back of where I want it to go, and then stick it into place like that. And then we're going to stitch it on, because I think it makes it look more special when it's stitched on. Now I did and ah with changing the thread on my sewing machine, but you know what, I would, because I think it would look a lot more classy if you use the same colour thread as the actual label. Now I don't know about you, but I think it's such a pleasure sewing on paper, and it's a great thing for kids to do. So we're using a straight stitch. We're just going to sew up the side, make sure the needle's in, lift up the foot, go down. It's just so lovely to sew with the paper. So go down on the other side and then across the bottom. Now ordering these labels, they only take about a week to come, and you can have any words that you want. And then go back to where you started and go backwards and forwards. You can see why we marked it out, because when you fold back your packaging, it is quite important that it falls in the middle. But like I said, if you're worried about it, then have your label going up the side. Press open the bias binding, so back to how it probably originally was when it was cut. So just give it a good old press. So press it open, you don't need to do very much of it, and then fold it in half and press it again, because then that can be caught much more easily in the seam when you stitch down. Also, if you're using any other things that you're using, press those as well, because you want to make them as much like flat paper as possible, because it will make it easier to work with. So I did have some vintage lace. Actually, I think this is really special vintage lace actually. It feels like handmade silk lace. So give that a press as well, because that will make that easier to work with. And then have a look and see how you might build up the braidings to create a look. Right, well I've made my decision and it's a bit simpler than what I was going to do before. So I'm going to have lace going on at the back, so I just need to stick it down with this glue first. Don't put too much on. And then I'm going to have my lace sticking out just a bit like that. And then on top of that, I'll just put another little bit of glue just at the back. And I just want the bias binding, I know it sounds really fussy, to hardly peep out at all. So I'm going to have it like that. So in gluing it, I'm going to leave it to go off for a little bit, but in gluing it, it will just make it much easier to sew when we put the two together like that. So I think I've left it to go off for long enough, and I'm going to position, so I'm going to fold this over. Always remember, don't fold down on this side, because I don't know, it just looks much better if there isn't a crease there. It looks more professional. So fold this exactly in line with the back, and then using a straight stitch, we're going to stitch down there on the paper, trapping everything inside like that, and then across the bottom. Oh, I can't decide. I can't decide if I want the braiding on there as well. Is it overkill? Oh, I think it is. Right, I'm going to stick to it like that. I've put my thread back to off-white. It is important that you sew in the correct colour. I think it is. I think it looks unprofessional when you don't use the right colour threads. So remember, don't create a fold on that side. Line everything up. I only want that bias binding to peep out. Woo! Backwards and forwards at the beginning. And you're going to go straight down. Now hopefully your glue has dried, because otherwise it's just going to cake all over that needle. And I'm going to stop about 2 mils from the bottom, I suppose, and then lift the needle, lift the foot, not the needle, and then come across the bottom. And then when you get to the end, backwards and forwards. And release. Now afterwards you have to cut off all your excess bias binding or lace. Now I am very happy with that. Look at the lace trapped in there and the purple bias binding. Now the next thing that you need to do is, using a hole punch exactly in the middle, you're going to hold them both together, get the hole punch exactly in the right place, and punch a hole in. Once you've punched a hole in the top, if you want the look of it being folded over, it is tricky with a regular hole punch to get all the way down there. So what I did was I just marked it with a pencil and pushed the pencil through, and then I put the split pin in like that and opened out the back. So it's not quite over yet, because what I like to do is I like to get a bit of the leftover wallpaper and make these little tags, and then I've frayed off some of this sacking fabric, and I make a little loop, put it through, so it's just like hanging a swing ticket. So I'll put the loop through like that, and then pull the ends out the other way, and then that's ready for me to tie onto my split pin. it's easier to tie it onto the split pin when the split pin's off. Now I have to say, usually I do make these packages for soap because I like to make my own soap. It's so easy. I do the hot melt method. You can find loads of videos for it, but if you want me to show you, just comment and I'll show you how to make your own homemade soap. It honestly takes about 15 minutes. And this one's an organic soap base, SLS free, and I've put bergamot and lemon in it. So I'm going to pop that inside like that. Sometimes I put a little message inside as well. And then I close it, so I close it at the back. I'm going to put my split pin through and open it at the back. Now I think that that is a pretty classy way of presenting your presents. Thank you so much for watching. See you again really soon. Bye.